And there we go, live with Suzy Cato. Hi, Suzy.
Hello, it's our time. Kia ora, talofa. It's our time, our special time of day.
I was so happy you did that because I was thinking, if I play that, I wonder if Tree Hut or TVNZ or something will flag me on YouTube. So there you go. You did it for us. It's all there.
Yeah, definitely. Can't say hello without doing that generally.
Thank you so much. On that, I want to say thank you so much for joining us. You and I have, been talking for several months about how to connect, and we're finally connected, and I'm so excited about it. And the thing about you, Suze, is other people are excited as well. You have this thing about you where I was thinking about it because I'm a little bit older. Ollie Olsen's sort of my earmark for kids television. You know, the keep cool till after school.
After school, yeah.
But people who are a bit younger than me, probably 30s and below, you are the face of their childhood, because that's the you and me and all that sort of stuff. So that song obviously is embedded in their heads. I've got Julia Deans from Fur Patrol on tomorrow, and I said to her, let's find a time, Thursday or Friday. Can't do Thursday morning because I'm talking to Suzy Cato. And I won't say she quite fangirled, but she was like, you're so lucky to have Suzy Cato on. So there's this thing about you that's really, you're a national treasure. You're a national treasure.
Yeah. I don't think when we made the program, we made it for preschoolers. I don't think anybody thought that we would still have a place in everybody's hearts so many years later. But because it was written by preschool educators and it was written with the right voice and the right vocabulary, and I had my happy places in front of the camera.
Yeah.
It just worked. It just this magical thing that worked. And man, it's such an honor. And I love it when I am now getting, as I go through the supermarket, the little kids and things like that, through schools, it's the kids going, it's Suzy, because they're now seeing me on TV with home learning TV, and Suzy's World is now skyrocketing on YouTube and things like that. But for a long time, it was heading into a bar or a restaurant or the supermarket with the older kids going, Suzy, can we do a selfie? That kind of thing, which has been lovely.
And one of the interesting things about you, well, not interesting, it is interesting, is that you, my friend, if I do this, haven't aged a frickin' day. So you look at people who have done TV 10, 15, 20 years ago, and you meet them 20 years later and you're like, who are you, old man? But you look exactly the same as you did when you made the program. So the kids must feel like it's actually, for little kids, sometimes it's weird when they get that experience of, you sort of look like the dad of the person they watch on television, whereas you do look like the same person. So it must be a thing for them thinking, you're still making it today. This is a today product for today, surely.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And I guess the thing about me is that I haven't really changed my style much. It's the same, almost the same colour. There's a little bit more of natural highlight coming through now. But I've made a conscious choice about staying who I am, because it wasn't too much of a detraction or a separation between the real Suzy and the one on telly. That being said, who we are with people on telly are different for who we are with our own family, who we are with our husband or our partners. Yeah. We have different hats for different things. But it's about being fairly true to who you are and being that person all the time. But I guess the thing is too, is I decided a long time ago that I wasn't going to bother doing anything. I moisturize and I cleanse and that sort of thing. But I've never had a lot of the treatments that various other folk have had. So I'm very fortunate. There must be a lot of elastic waist in my genes to be able to still look okay. But don't get too close to the camera. Don't change your prescription there, Pat. I think you're being very kind.
Well, age is a funny thing, isn't it? I mean, I knew you through your husband when we were both working at More FM, and that would have been 98, 99. And look at me now. I look like a fucking troll. It's ridiculous what I've turned into.
Loving the beard.
Big grey and ginger. My kids constantly tease me about being ginger. So it's you are people will be annoyed with you the world over, I'm sure, when they look at that 1990s picture and today.
The thing is, I can't grow the beard. That's the thing with me, is I can't.
Hey,
I'm starting to get the odd hair, but
it's interesting you say that you're most comfortable in front of the camera, because I also wonder, would that also kind of go along with just talking to kids? and I asked that question for a specific reason. I've told a story about you several times, and I had children at the time. Now, I never had children when I was working, you know, in and around your husband. I had them 8 or 9 or 10 years later, and we went to some wanky event at the Altea Centre. It might have been something like High Five Live or something like that, and I took my kids along to it, and there was a halftime break. And we came out into the foyer and everyone's chatting. Oh, there's Susie. Go over and talk to Susie. And I was talking to you guys and I looked around and you were nowhere to be seen. And you were sitting on the floor of the Aotea, you know, foyer talking to my kids. Little circle of them around you and you were just sitting talking to them. And I was just like, it's one of my like favorite memories of, you know, the experiences that my kids had growing up. Sometimes when you work in this industry, you know, you get to do a few cool things, and that's the one that I always remember. And it seemed so natural and not forced, and no one was looking, and it wasn't for the cameras. So that must be surely one of your happy places as well, because I've seen it happen when it didn't need to happen.
Yeah, oh, definitely, and it is something that as a parent now I realise that sometimes it's good just to let your kids go and do things, and they don't have to be talked to and entertained all the time. But I think back in those days too, when I was on television so much in that headspace. Is that you or me?
Doesn't matter.
Oh, sorry, it was me.
Either way, okay. Doesn't matter.
I was really in that headspace, and I often found it so much less pressure, particularly in, as you say, those types of environments, to just go and hang with the kids, because you got it, an honest opinion, and there wasn't any pressure to talk about, you know, intense topics and be anybody that you didn't want to be, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, I told my kids I was talking to you today, and I've got a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, and an 11-year-old now. And again, they got excited because they've got still a book of yours signed to them. And, you know, and even though that sits on our bookshelf that they obviously don't read now, but, you know, when they figured out, when they connected the dots as to who I was chatting to today, they were very excited by the opportunity.
Oh, you'll have to give them a big squeeze from me.
Yeah, well, two of them are upstairs sick at the moment. This whole COVID thing going on, one of them's got a scratchy throat, and you just go, well, just stay home then. You know, the government's kind of said to us, if you have any symptoms, stay home. And not that I have the slightest concern that they have symptoms, but I had a cold 2.5, 3 weeks ago. It was the week before Auckland went to level 3. And you become very aware. You can probably still hear there's a bit of a rasp in my throat. You become very aware of yourself, because I walk into a shop and you kind of go, and you're like, well, okay, what is everybody else thinking right now? I'm fine, but it's an interesting time.
Hey, I've always got a lozenge in my pocket at the moment, because invariably you start talking about it. It's like you say the word nits and everybody starts scratching their head. Yeah. You start talking about COVID or whatever, and you need to clear your throat. But yes, you're right. Anything about needing to blow your nose, and I just find I'm washing my hands a lot more lately.
Yeah, it's
just being aware.
It is fascinating that through that kind of everyone's celebrating level 1 and the whole, 40,000 people at Eden Park, I do think we got a bit complacent. I think there were some gaps in the system, and I saw a headline today on my phone that one of the ministers has taken responsibility for the border testing being not maybe as stringent as it was. So I think everyone got a bit slack, and I'm hoping what this little hiccup does is snaps us all back into let's start washing our hands again, even if we go back to level 1. And that might be the thing that gets us through to, fingers crossed, a vaccine. Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Oh, exactly. And the old dab sneeze and all those sorts of things. It really has to become a part of daily life, ongoing, indefinitely. And it's something that we should have been doing anyway. We teach it to new entrants, but we kind of let it fall by the way. Yeah.
I saw a stat yesterday on someone's Facebook page about the number of deaths in New Zealand, and because of the whole, as you say, dab, sneeze, or coughing into the elbow, or coughing into here, or washing hands, the number of deaths at the moment not even per capita, the number of deaths is down dramatically from the average of deaths for this time of year for the past 5 years, because people aren't dying of like the elderly aren't dying of the flu at the moment, because we're all being careful with our we're being more careful than we have been, And so the number of
Sure.
deaths is down significantly overall, which is a really interesting little, I don't want to say experiment like I'm cold-hearted, but it is an interesting byproduct of what we're doing.
Definitely. I think it was about 1,200. I saw the same headlines, 1,200 people, because we were losing about 500, I think, a week or a month with, flu-related, cold-related respiratory problems. So I think we are being a lot more careful of our most vulnerable too, which has got to be a good thing. The only thing that concerns me in that situation is the lack of socialization.
Yeah.
How many people are becoming more lonely? And I think there were some interesting statistics on that about a week or so ago, that it's the youth that are feeling more alone than the elderly, because there are so many organisations keeping an eye on our elderly because they are the most vulnerable. They need the most help. So there are perhaps more people, not necessarily knocking on doors, but, just being more aware and calling out and saying hi and things like that.
It's interesting because we have, like when I say we, I mean in society, there seems to be a bit of an idea that young people in this society are all in contact with each other on devices and over the internet, even when they're in the same room. So it's interesting if that being if that's the fact, because a lot of their communication hasn't actually changed that much, because that's still what we're all doing.
Yeah. But how about the quality of that interaction, though? That's the only thing.
Yeah.
You think of the youth interaction on their phone. I don't know what your children are like on their devices, but it's a lot of funnies, and lots of nonsense talk, jibber jabber. And I'm not saying that this is definitely what's happening on every device, but I don't know that they're getting the depth of conversation that perhaps older people are.
Yeah, that's interesting. Here's this here's this graphic. Let's have a look at this. Here's this graphic that shows deaths. It's from a tweet, and it says the number of deaths covering the quarterly population estimates to the weekly. This is the New Zealand death rate in 2020 versus 2010 to 2019. So the red line for people who are watching us shows the average death rate at the moment, averaging over that 9 year or that decade, and the blue line down the bottom here shows what 2020 is. So it's significantly less at the moment. Just to finish off that part of the conversation. Yeah, interesting. The communication thing, and I hadn't thought about that. So the quality of their communication, which implies perhaps when they're at school, face to face with their mates, is still where they get their quality interaction. The phones is more of a, I don't know, it's not a byproduct. What word am I looking for? It's not as important. It's play. It's mess around. It's their version of whatever, watching TV and blobbing out these days. They just do it with the phone, texting each other or messaging or tweeting or TikToking or whatever they're doing at the moment, or reeling, which is the new Instagram one. You must be on Reels by now, mustn't you?
I have not heard of a reel. What is a reel?
Reels are the Instagram version of TikTok, basically. So
okay.
They've come out with a similar plan, and it's called Reels. And I just noticed this morning, actually, I'm a visual learner, so it's very easy for me to get caught down visual rabbit holes. So I was on my phone today, and I had Instagram open because someone had sent me a message, and I noticed that there was a reel there. So I looked at it, and then I realized 20 minutes later I've looked at them in 40 reels that made up of absolute trash, and half of them were just copied straight over from TikTok. And anyway, because I mean, you communicating to, I guess if it is the preschool, maybe it's not quite the same, but I'm thinking a younger generation, you must be up to date with what's on trend and what technology is being used. And is that something you actively kind of keep an eye on?
Well, look, being a bit of a one-man band, I kind of say, although my husband now has joined forces with me and has become, during lockdown last time, he became the cameraman, the soundman. He downloaded an editing program and learned how to edit, and we just became this machine. But I do so much of my own stuff. I don't have a team of people. It is just me that does the Instagram and the YouTube and all the bits and pieces, that I sometimes get a little bit lost in the work and I miss what is trending and what's happening. But I don't have a problem with that because I'm not a trendsetter, and I've never been like an A-lister or anything like that. I'm not the trendsetter. I'm somebody that I guess I'm stable and you'll find me in the usual places type thing, if you know what I mean. So I got into TikTok last lockdown because I thought it was a really good way to encourage families to communicate with their teens.
Right.
So instead of it all being about, have you done your work yet? Have you done the dishes yet? Come on, do the vacuuming, you know, they're at home. It's actually about having a bit of fun and lightening up the situation and things like that. So no, I didn't even know about a reel, and I aren't up with the latest trends, obviously. So yeah, I've got a bit of homework to do. I need to spend more time with my daughter and do a reel.
Well, it's funny because I kind of it's a weird thing because I don't get paid to work in the media anymore. So when you say work in the media, but I still sort of do this, and I work with companies and help them with their marketing and advertising and stuff. But because I'm still sort of around that media world, I ingest a lot of media, and especially when it comes to politics and news, I love that stuff. So often I'll know about things before my kids do, and then my kids know about them, and then all of a sudden it's a trend, and I'm like, yeah, but we were doing that 6 weeks ago. Come on, guys, your dad's so ahead of the trend.
Good on you. Can you just slip me a few little tips and
Sure.
let me know what's coming up?
I was teasing them about throwing the woe, which is where you throw the woe and you do the big thing, and then they thought I was an idiot, and then it became a trend. All of a sudden they were throwing the woes all over the school, and so I do it to them now. But now it's gone too far, and now it's back to, because once the kids have it, it's cool. But then when grown-ups start picking up on it, it becomes, you know, terrible and geeky and the worst thing you can do. So it's done the full evolution so far, even though I was trying to throw them the woe way before.
So if we are just all over TikTok, it's going to stop them to being on TikTok. And
it is 100%.
We need to bombard all those social media things.
It's exactly what kills something is, well, I guess I'm a Gen Xer, but, you know, Gen Xers and Boomers. Gen Xers now, it's a funny thing about Gen Xers being the old ones, because they were the guys and girls that sort of revolutionized the world. You know, X was the unknown quantity, and it was all that sort of thing. But I guess now Gen Xers and Boomers, and maybe even on some level, you know, millennials, because TikTok certainly was a Gen Z sort of thing. It was the teens, so maybe the millennials being on there kind of made it a bit more mainstream. But you see it in things like Facebook. Facebook now is when I say a granddad social media, I don't mean just for old people, but it is very commercial and very corporate, you know, and it's very baby showers and birthday parties and businesses getting messages out there. It's not the cutting edge. Where it started was just in universities in America. It was just, you know, people who are 19 to 22, and now it's corporate. It's the biggest corporate probably thing in the world, along with Google and Apple probably.
Well, you think back in the day when text first came out, it was a way of companies being able to get messages, telecommunications companies getting messages out to their linesmen and things like that. Come back or put another roll of wire down or whatever, and how we've taken it over. And can you imagine life without text now?
Yeah, no, I have in my phone. My kids always tell me off because at the moment I've got, I've got 262 unread text messages because I'm constantly getting messages from people, and it's an easy way to communicate and get in touch with. But it's also an easy way to get back to people in your own time. I quite like that. Not that I ignore people, but it's like if someone sends me a message and it can wait till tomorrow, I do. And then normally first thing in the morning is I'll do like emails and follow-ups and that kind of stuff. And if it's a work thing, the text message can be that as well. Yeah, and communication is interesting, and it's I don't know if it's better. It's just it's the new norm, isn't it? I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about letters being written home by soldiers at war, you know, in the first half of last century, and how eloquent and how well written they were, the use of poetry and prose, and for a 19-year-old sitting, you know, on Normandy sort of thing, seems so foreign to us now. Probably a bit like when Shakespeare wrote his stuff, it was sort of the language of the street, and now we hear it and we think, gosh, how do you understand that high-class English sort of thing? And I guess, I don't know, you think about a soldier at war today, he certainly wouldn't send a letter home, would he? Maybe at most he'd get an email, but maybe it would only just be a tweet or a text.
Text, yeah, you're right.
And that'd be it. I don't know if it's better,
and the text abbreviation.
Yeah.
None of the beautiful prose.
And it wouldn't be, I'm not saying it's better or worse, it's just the way it is. I mean, to knock out a What do they do now? Oh, text, you can do whatever you want, but tweets have gone up to 280 characters recently, haven't they? Not recently. Yeah, it's an interesting time, and I guess that flows on into what we're doing with media and communication in general, and moving away from TV and towards the internet. Although in New Zealand here, it still seems that TV is king on some level. I mean, when Level 4 happened. Now, tell us the story. How did it happen? Did you approach the government and TVNZ saying we should do this, or were you shoulder tapped to start up this home learning TV? Well, because the way I read it was sort of you were sort of a mainstay of decision making and stuff as well. How did that all happen? Tell me your story.
Oh, I'd love to have been part of the decision making team, but what I did was I went, hey, we're going into lockdown level 4. There were going to be all these kids at home. I have all the Susie's World stuff. I'll just put it up on YouTube. I know a lot of other production companies who have a stack of stuff that's not being used.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if we can get a channel going. So I contacted a couple of the service providers and started getting some pricing and things like that. And I went, okay, it's still not going to be a feasible thing. And with sponsorship and so on, how are we going to do this? One of the service providers, Cordia, actually said, because I said, hey, do you know if the Ministry of Education is doing anything? Because it would make sense if I offered them Susie's World then. They said, actually, here's a contact. And it was somebody in their communications department. I kind of went, I don't know if that's going to be the right person. But the chain mail made it through, and I got the telephone call saying, what are you thinking? What are your plans? And so I was involved with several different groups and working with a lot of primary school teachers who were creating content, as in the scripting and pulling together all the resources and the information and things like that. And they said, yes, we'd love some Susie's World, but would you be prepared to create some new content for us for our maths and science? And it was like, yes, I'd love to. Said yes, and then went, how do I do that? Normally I have a camera person in here with me. This is the little studio set that I use in the bottom of my rumpus room for my YouTube channel and my Facebook live streams and things like that. So I thought, we'll use all this. We've got all this stuff. My garage is full of props that I've collected for numerous years. So whenever they needed anything, there was only one thing I needed to do. I could not find my plastic farm animals. My 15 and 13-year-old don't tend to play with those anymore. They must be on the roof or something like that. So I managed to find a local kindergarten, and they were happy as long as I gave everything a good wash and a sterilised before I brought it back for them to give me their farm animals to use. And I think I asked the neighbours if they had any worms. Couldn't find worms in the garden. I was asked, I'm going off track here, but so taking it back to your original question, it was a bit of a shoulder tap. I'd already had a bit of a plan in place, but I just tag teamed onto the Ministry of Education. And what they managed to do with TVNZ was phenomenal. So to have taken it, I think they took 10 to 13 days to create this channel, which would normally have 18 months to organise, to confirm contracts and all those bits and pieces. They just fast-tracked everything and made it happen. And the uptake of it was phenomenal, particularly with the younger generation, the older kids, the secondary school kids. Their schools had provided, in most cases, lots of information and lots of tasks. All the kids didn't do it at all, whereas the primary school kids really benefited from it, particularly those in areas that couldn't access the internet and so on. They were able to find it on Freeview. So, it worked a treat.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think that... I remember when I was working in radio, there was the talk of digital radio, Sirius XM, and I think we call it DAB in the UK, coming to New Zealand. I was always of the opinion, I don't think we'll get digital radio in New Zealand because you have to have sort of a 10-year lag. Because if you've got a digital radio tuner in your car, you have to either have a new car or buy it specifically or wait for the new cars to flow down. And of course, we didn't see it here. We went straight to the phone and the apps and that kind of stuff. And I wonder if we're a bit the same with TV. It still seems like TV is king for a certain generation. I know that speaking to Jack Tame during the lockdown, they were saying the numbers that were watching those live conferences at 1 p.m. On TVNZ were through the roof, biggest audiences they've ever had for anything. people have the chance to go to, I watch quite a bit on the New Zealand Herald. I follow them on YouTube as well, or Stuff, or TV3, or News Hub, or, RNZ. They all carried them, but TVNZ seemed to be the biggest place for people still to watch it. And it makes me think, in the radio example, we sort of jumped that DAB digital radio thing and went straight to the internet. I wonder if we're at that point with visual TV or a visual sharing of media, where people can go to the internet now, but they're sort of, maybe they're not as much as they were. What are we leaping something? Is this just the dregs of people hanging on to TV, or is there something coming next, which is going to be the thing everyone just goes straight to? And I'm acknowledging, Netflix is huge and that kind of stuff, but in general, TV still seems to be, the biggest audiences for any one particular show.
Well, I guess it's the whole thing too is with Freeview and so on, you're not relying on your broadband. It is easily accessible, so it doesn't matter where you are. If you've got, so long as you've got your TV and your Freeview decoder, whatever you call it, you are far more accessible to everybody. And it's like, that's what I loved about radio, is that you were accessible to anybody. If anybody had a transistor, they could take you anywhere, into the toilet, whereas it was a bit harder to lug the TV through anywhere. We are so lucky with our screens that we can take them anywhere, but there is something about having that access that doesn't require a broadband and a decent download rate and all those sorts of things. I'd like to see, we are doing with the kids a lot of family viewing, which we started in lockdown, which we hadn't really done prior. We kind of did our own things, but we are going through, and we're not binge watching. We're not watching several episodes a night. We're not even watching them consecutive nights. The Umbrella Academy, the latest series has just come out. So we're watching that twice a week. And there is the key. I mean, we're just as much as the kids going, wouldn't it be good to watch another one? Should we watch it tomorrow night? No, we've actually scheduled it. And having that destination and that delay gets your imagination going. You start thinking, what could be happening next? We were out, my son and I were out walking yesterday morning and found randomly an umbrella drawn in chalk on the footpath. He spotted it before me. I think I was more excited than he was, and I started going, but we got talking about it, and we talked about the whole jumping through the universe. You're familiar with the program I'm talking about?
I know it. I haven't watched it yet, but it's on Netflix, isn't it? The Umbrella Academy.
Yeah.
Now, is that the one that basically children have special powers?
Yes.
And they were all born on the same day or something like that? Have I got the right story?
Yes, there were 40 odd babies born on the same day to women who hadn't previously been pregnant. So all of a sudden it was their miraculous birth. And in one case, I think in the first episode, a young girl jumps into a pool. As she comes up out of the water, she's giving birth to a child. So she's only like about 16, had never even kissed anybody before, and bang, she's giving birth in the pool. So 6 of the babies are found and are brought into a house and brought up by this particular person in the Umbrella Academy. You found it?
Oh, yeah.
There she is.
We won't play any sound because we play sound, we get pulled off YouTube, but it can be in the background there.
There we go. That's
so a Netflix product. And then they go to this academy. That's the thing. It's a bit like, it feels from watching it's on my to watch list. It feels a bit like watching, the academy, like Xavier with the X-Men. They have their X-Men Academy, but this is for the young children sort of academy. Yeah,
definitely. So we've found several series, and on a Monday night we watch. I can't remember which one it is. I think it was the Umbrella Academy last night, which was Wednesday night. So, we've got it split up. But we are doing that instead of binge watching, having destination viewing, and it's around the TV. So in this case, it's smart TV as opposed to traditional broadcast. And we need to start looking at local content so that we can do the same. But it was just, we latched on to what the kids were really interested in, and we're sitting around that doing them together.
That's really interesting. So it makes me think as well, you have conversations, well, some people have conversations around, how technology is bad and driving the society to evils, and it's how we use it. I've always said, technology is not good nor bad. It's what you do with it, and you're using the technology, not like allowing the technology to use you, if you know what I'm saying. Because
definitely.
I've been stuck in that cycle. I noticed actually TVNZ, I think, is carrying the Epstein 4-part documentary, TVNZ on demand. That was on Netflix, and I binge watched that in about 2 days. But what you're saying inspires me a bit, because, you know, to stop and wait a day, it is. But actually to schedule it is that you're using that as a tool rather than being sucked into the rabbit hole, for want of a better word. Where I'm doing what I do with my kids. Well, I don't schedule it, but I do a similar thing that I say expose them to. We enjoy together some of the best movies of the last 30 years. And with everything being on demand at the moment, you can find something somewhere. My kids have just got to a point now where I think they're happy to trust me when I say this is a really good movie. And it means that I've been able to introduce them to a whole lot of really good movies. Like my favourite movie is Johnny Depp and Leonardo DiCaprio and What's Eating Gilbert Grape. That's my favourite movie of all times. Love it to bits.
Okay.
Like the first or second movie that DiCaprio was ever in, he plays a handicapped boy, and he plays it so well that a lot of people thought that they had trained a handicapped boy how to act, because no one knew who he was at that time. Like he's very, very good. Great story.
I watched it years ago. Can't remember it off the top of my head.
Love it.
But it is great to introduce kids to that. We just watched Edward Scissorhands.
Yes.
So it was good to, and then they have the whole conversation about Johnny Depp and what he's going through, and you know, all those sorts of things. But it's about not just viewing that movie; it's about talking about it and looking at the technology that was used at that time, and how things are different now. And hey, no CGI, and you know, all those sorts of things. How did they do that? Which, having those conversations, getting the mind thinking beyond what you're just sitting and digesting, is so important, and such a great thing to do with your kids, because it's all opinion based, or not all opinion based, but it can be opinion based, and it's good to find out what they feel about things just as much as what you feel about things, and sharing your ideas.
And it's also, I think it's really good to. I have a 65-inch screen upstairs, which is ridiculous, but good fun. So it is like watching it on a big screen, but it's also really cool watching stuff with them, and then having the ability to kind of go, pause. Now, do you understand why this is pertinent? Do you understand what's behind this? And if they say no, we stop and have a conversation, or we keep watching, we come back to it. One we did recently was we watched Hamilton on Disney+. My children are now addicted to Hamilton. Like, we watched it when it came out 4 or 5 weeks ago. They are still playing the soundtrack every single day, singing every single song.
Oh, brilliant.
Like, I actually am getting to a point where I'm like, okay, enough with Hamilton. Like, I loved it, but you know, there's that line in it, for people who know it, where they say, immigrants, we get the job done, and the whole crowd cheers. And so we pause it and we go, now, do you understand what's going on here? Do you understand why that was such an evocative statement? And the kids are like, why? And we had a whole conversation around Donald Trump, and you know, at that point in time was right when Trump was coming in, when Hamilton was coming out, and sort of the audience is reacting to it now because it's a very pointed comment by the actors on stage. It's a political statement, what they're talking, and they're relating it back to today, and then we go on, and we do that quite a bit. We do that quite a bit with all sorts of stuff, including we were watching Rockstar yesterday, which is Mark Wahlberg. And so what we do at the end of that is we have a little lesson about Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, where Mark Wahlberg first came out. So we do a lot of that kind of stuff. And technology these days is amazing to be able to do that. I mean, when I was a kid, you know, when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, I guess, or 80s, you couldn't just go, oh, now can we have a look at something that relates to that actor that they used to do back, because nothing existed. And now everything exists, and even if you can't find exactly what you want, you can find something to further the conversation around what you're talking about on YouTube, online, on Spotify, you know, whatever it is. My kids know all these 80s songs because they've heard them on Glee. And I roll my eyes and I go, dudes, let's listen to the original. And we go back and listen to the original. Then we actually go, this was a remake in the 80s from a song in the 60s. Let's listen to the original, and we go back to that one. And but you can do that now. You certainly couldn't do that 30 years ago.
No, definitely. We have got the turntable out last lockdown, And actually, we did it over Christmas to begin with, and then we did it last lockdown. And now I've got the turntable as part of my set down here. But listening to those original records, and then going and listening to the remastered version on Spotify or whatever. And then, but as you say, it's just broadening their horizons musically as well as through films and so on. It's great.
Yeah, you
It's
realize
great for us too to have a trip down memory lane.
yeah, Spotify has been a revelation for me. You look at, it's funny. I used to laugh when I was back in the start of the century. I used to laugh thinking one day Eminem would be on oldies stations, because that's just the way it goes, because it felt so wrong. And now 20 years later, when I go and I look for something to listen to, a lot of the times they're songs that are 10, 15 years old. And I've kind of finally realized, when you're speaking to someone in their 70s or 80s and they're listening to things from the 50s and 60s, you kind of go, because although I enjoy current music and I listen to a lot of it, you can really, I heard someone once say that music is the soundtrack of your life, and you can
I was about to say the same thing.
Yeah, you can have that song that takes you back to that moment, and as you get older, maybe you have more of them, and the songs become older and older as well. So yeah, Spotify has been an amazing revelation for me as well. My 14-year-old taught me a lesson about how current technology is so integrated into their lives when we were talking about juggling, because I'm quite a good juggler, and I, taught my kids how to sort of juggle to get the three balls going, what the routine is. And she did, my 14-year-old, who there might have been 10 or 12, whatever, said, how did you learn how to juggle, Dad? And I said, I just kind of taught myself. And then she's like, oh, did you watch something on YouTube? And I was like, dude, it's like it's been around for as long as you've been around. That's about it. And had no concept of the world without YouTube. Has just like that world doesn't exist. It's like me thinking about, my parents, growing up in the 40s and 50s. Just no concept of that whatsoever. It's amazing.
When you think my grandmother, she passed several years ago, but several years ago now when I think about it. But in her lifetime, she had gone from, as a child, having the little cooler on the side of the house where you kept your butter and your meat and things like that,
safe.
To seeing all this technology. Yeah, they're safe, that's right. Just having all this technology. I don't know that we'll actually see the same in our lifetimes, or whether we're just taking it for granted now because we've always had the fridge and we've always had the TV and all those sorts of things. That being said, I do remember when my grandfather got his first colour TV, and I didn't want to go home because we only had stink black and white at home. But our kids don't really have a concept of life without all this technology.
Well, I think that's the difference with our generation, is that, and we're basically the same age, is that it's the technological things that we go, because we've had the refrigerator the whole time, we've had that, but what we haven't had is the internet. My first cell phone was 91, 92. So, I was 19, 20, 18, 19 by then, it was like, that was my first cell phone. We're fighting for my bloody 11-year-old who isn't at intermediate school yet to say, no, your siblings got their phones. We have a thing called a whānau phone, and we have that when they're at intermediate school, which means if she goes off to an event or something, she can take the phone with her, but it's not her phone. And then when they get into secondary school, that's when they get introduced to their own phone. And we're having to, when I say we're having to fight with her, she's not going to win. It's not really a problem. She's little. I'll win that fight. But there is so much pressure now not to be a part of that world. So I think that's what we're going to see. My kids are going to be, 40 going, my dad, when he used to have to sit at the bus stop and read a book waiting for a bus, That's, in fact...
Instead of flicking through your phone,
we've had that conversation. I say to my kids, I'm a bit of a hard bastard actually sometimes, and I take the phones off them and stuff, and I say to them, you actually have to learn to be bored. It's actually a skill that you need to understand, that constant entertainment is actually not the best. So we have cell phone free Sundays, and my kids typically leave, the older ones leave their phones out of their bedrooms. They charge them in the living room and that kind of stuff overnight.
Great.
So a few things like that, because we're just, It's
We're
how
the
you.
same.
It's the same again. How you use technology. They're an amazing thing, and they're an amazing asset, but they're also designed to fire off certain synapses in the brain and mind that are the same synapses as cocaine and alcohol. So they can,
Exactly.
so they can be very detrimental.
Definitely. Now, you have to excuse me because I'm going to have one of those coughs that we talked about earlier. Excuse
You
me.
should go for it.
Excuse me. Ha.
But there's no one around you
so-
to have to worry about with that cough.
No, exactly.
Standing in the queue at the supermarket, 2 meters apart. That's the worst thing. That's the worst thing. Are you because you're based in Auckland, yeah? So are you gloving up and are you masking up when you go out and about at the moment? Oh, there you go. There's the mask.
There we go. Made by my daughter.
Yeah.
We went for the rubber bands around the ears, so that was a nifty little trick.
Because you said
Works quite well.
you said you went walking with your son. So are you still kind of appropriately so out and about at the moment, or are you hunkering down at home and waiting until 3's over?
No, we are out and about because that's one thing we didn't do a lot of last time was because seriously, we spent hours in here and we would go up, have lunch with the kids, we'd have breakfast with them, have lunch with them, have dinner with them, but we spent so much time down here that we are spending a lot more time with them this time.
Yeah.
Ministry of Education had the chance to prepare for any eventual lockdowns, and we did a pre-recording. So this one is so much easier for our little bubble, but we are getting out and about. From your mental health point of view, it's really, really important. We're homeschooling my son at the moment, and every day we're out before school time, we are out walking with him, and we are same with my daughter. She's actually, I haven't joined her yet because she's doing such a hard workout, but she does a workout nearly every day.
Yeah.
Just to keep that whole fitness and moving and things like that. But it's important to get out into the sunshine, to get out and to normalise things so that I must admit, out walking this time, we are in level 3. So things are a little bit more relaxed. But even when I was out walking in level 4, I did it a couple of times last time, people are smiling more. They are waving, and I make sure that I do that. It doesn't matter what time of the year it is, whether you're in lockdown or not, you make eye contact, you wave and those sorts of things. And just connecting with their neighbours, waving down the driveway at people sitting in their garages and that sort of thing. It's really important. So we aren't masked up when we're walking because otherwise it doesn't matter how much tissue you put underneath there. Your glasses just fog up. So, but we're doing the wide berth and so on, yeah.
The level 4 lockdown here in Dunedin earlier in the year, it was quite eerie actually, and I'm sure it was the same around the whole country. And I remember one of my clients is a grocery, a vegetable store, and they were essential workers, so I was still going backwards and forwards, once a week, sort of helping them get the message out there that they were there and available to help. And I ended up travelling down. For people who know Dunedin, we've got these one-way systems that come in and out of the city. They kind of go right from the north to the south, and it's between 3 and 5 lanes each way. And the first time I went out, which was in the first week, completely empty. You can probably see for almost a kilometre, not a single car on it. And then like the second week I went out, 1 or 2 cars. The third week I went out, a handful of cars. Fourth week I went out sort of like a Sunday, and just that started to get, because I don't know about you, but I probably still am if I'm absolutely honest about it. You're a bit nervous about this whole thing, this whole COVID thing, and the unknown quantity of it, and will it be cyclical? And when I say like the flu, I don't mean it's kind of like a flu. It's not, but how the flu is cyclical, and you get a new strand every year, and there's still so many unknowns. I think in that initial level 4, people kind of freaked out and really did hunker down. And I just hope that after this level 3 for Auckland, we can find that happy medium where we're doing the right things, as we said before, without killing the economy altogether. But for me, I'm like, my primary desire is to see us COVID free, and if we have to take a financial hit, so be it. Over places opening up too early and having like Victoria they're talking about at the moment, having too much of a hit. So yeah, it's an interesting time, real interesting time.
Yeah, and it's a chance for I think when you talk about statistics and things like that, the rate of domestic abuse was down, and those sorts of things. okay, I understand there were a few divorces that came out of the last lockdown, but I think people actually went in with a mindset that we're going to have to do this together. And that's the message that was coming across from everybody on social media. We're doing this together and everything will be okay. And maybe they use that as an opportunity to talk and to actually get on with people. I think several older couples were surprised at how much better they got on than they thought they were going to, because they hadn't spent years with each other. And as I mean, heading off in different work jobs and things like that, they weren't used to spending so many hours together, and they got on better than they had anticipated. So there's been some good things come from this. And I think, as you say, that we don't become complacent, that we look after each other, that we wash our hands and we catch our colds, sneezes and things like that, and just being more aware.
The people who didn't seem to be impacted financially from that 4 or 5 week lockdown, generally the ones I've spoken to sort of seem to enjoy it, because they had time off.
Sure.
And the gardens around New Zealand were looking better than they'd ever looked by the end of it. But the story that wins so far that I've heard is AJ Hackett. I spoke to AJ last week, did a podcast with him, and I was talking to him for sort of the 3 or 4 months before by chance, and then thought, lockdown, maybe this is a good chance to do a podcast with AJ. So I was talking to him through the lockdown, and he kind of got stuck outside of New Zealand. He was one of those ones that was on a flight back to New Zealand. The flight got cancelled. He couldn't get on another flight. Then there was no flights, and he said the other day he happened to be, and I think it was Thailand, but it's a place where obviously the Hackett brand owns a resort, and he happened to be at one of his resorts, and at that time all of his kids were at the resort as well.
Oh,
and then there was no
how wonderful.
And then there was no guests at the resort, so they spent, I think he said, 4 months at the resort with his kids with no guests but staff. So and they spent time kind of fixing up the resort and stuff. But he said he got his diving ticket during lockdown because he was on the resort with his family, had to stop, basically had to have a holiday. So I think he wins so far from the best lockdown. Because that sounded pretty cool.
And I'm going to see how I can be adopted.
Yeah. The current, obviously they've relaunched Home Learning TV. Are you doing anything new for it, or is it reusing the stuff from the original lockdown?
There's a little bit of new stuff, but as I say, we had the chance to pre-record. So they decided about a month ago to pre-record a little block of programs, and then if we went into lockdown, it would be enough to see us over for a period of time. Then they would recycle some through. I've also got double back-to-back Susie World episodes. So today there are 2 episodes about teeth.
Oh, nice.
And so they've put those 2 together, and I think they've got about 14 episodes, so 7 days worth. So I think what they're doing is waiting to see what the next decision is. It's on Friday, isn't it, tomorrow? The next decision on whether they're extending or what. And then they'll take it from there, whether we're back in studio or what, I'm not too sure.
I noticed a tweet this morning from Michelle Acorte, who said, I'm paraphrasing, but she basically said, we've been in these unprecedented times for so long, when do they become precedented? And I thought that's an interesting thought. So if we extend on Friday or if something happens, does it then become we're now living in precedented times? I thought it was quite clever.
Sure.
Quite clever. It also raises the question for me that this Home Learning TV has been so successful. I mean, you'll remember, others may as well. There used to be TVNZ 7. There used to be that sort of genuine public broadcasting channel. If it's been so successful, obviously in part because kids weren't at school, but just in general, does it just scream for a need for this kind of channel in New Zealand anyway?
Well, we do have Hey Hey, which had its own website for some time, and it's now on TVNZ On Demand. So that is it was originally designed for primary school age children, but because of some of the content that they included from day one was for a slightly younger age group, they've now got a stronger focus for preschoolers than they have for primary school age kids. So they are, my understanding is they are still looking at how they continue to support that channel with primarily local content. But I think a lot of schools throughout the country are looking at how they provide education now, and are looking at various ways, whether there is more YouTube or whatever. I know that several schools, they haven't gone into detail of how they are looking at it or how they are changing, but things are underway.
I wonder as well, another one of the byproducts that's come from this, and several people have talked about this, is the ability to remotely work and to make things that aren't perhaps the norm, like you'd make a product with a production company with a full crew, like you were saying, and that goes to a television station. I mean, I'm not the same sort of level of production that you were at, but you know, this podcast and stuff, I had a producer for the first 75 episodes, and I'd have guests in front of me for 74 out of 75 of those, so it's all changed a lot as well. But another byproduct is doing things differently, and I wonder if, you know, for a long time society, and we've said, oh look, we've got the technology to work from home remotely and have a more balanced lifestyle, but no one ever did it. And now we're being forced to do it. People are going, hey, this works quite well actually, and companies are going, maybe we don't need that $10 million building, you know, we can have people working remotely. And again, it comes back to media and what they're going to do, and how they're going to provide products to their end user, or the content to their audience.
Yeah, well, before we went into lockdown, back into lockdown in Auckland, I think we still only had something like 80% of the traffic on our roads. So there was still a huge number of people working from home.
Yeah.
But look, the question you asked just a moment ago, and I got talking about education, was there is definitely a need for children's television channel, and there has always been a need. So it's been great that we've had them over a period of time, but they've all fallen by the wayside. We definitely need something. We're one of the few countries in the world that doesn't have a channel designated for children and for local content. So there are none of our broadcasters are providing even a decent amount of airtime for children's content. Our children are finding it elsewhere on screens, and invariably that is going to be something from overseas.
Yeah.
So there's a massive need. They need to see their stories. I mean, there's the Kia Kids News has got funding again. I'm not too sure when their next sort of content's coming up. Kiwi Kids News has been a great website for kids to be able to get snippets of news, and that's been created by, I think it was originally out of Tauranga with a teacher there. But those are just two little pockets. We need so much more. So, I mean, I do that with my YouTube channel. I hadn't been able to find a broadcaster, so I did that with my YouTube channel. I've got a kids radio show on 25 radio stations around the country. But because it's not on any of the big mainstreams, it's on all the smaller access radio stations and little individual regional stations. It doesn't have the same kind of commercial clout behind it. It's probably still one of the best kept secrets, even 10 years later. But there's some amazing content. There are fantastic producers around the country, and there's a wealth of content there that needs to find a space somewhere for kids to be able to find it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll just hop off my pedestal audio or my soapbox for a minute.
I think that's completely fair and right, and it kind of brings back to the conversation that I had with a few media people at the start of that first lockdown, which was what's going to happen to TV, especially with all the advertising fleeing. And I still hope that TVNZ1 kind of joins with RNZ and becomes a proper public broadcaster, commercial-free entity. And then and that means the advertisers from TVNZ1 can then go to the other stations, the Primes of this world and the TV3s and even the TV2s. And so, you know, you've got fewer advertisers, but a fewer space for them to spread. And then that perfectly aligns itself for, 2 p.m. till 5 p.m. every day, TVNZ1 children's programming, because it's not set up for a commercial. And that was the thing that TVNZ7 did so well. Part of the, I don't know whether it was officially part of the charter, but it was more about providing a need for the community than having to get a certain number of viewers or ratings for advertisers. And that makes a huge difference to what you can produce.
Yeah, and that's what New Zealand On Air is all about, is about providing funds for programs that aren't highly commercialised. They aren't, they meet the needs of the little niche groups, kids and so on. So, it'd be a shame for anything to happen to them, but we do still need the broadcasters to play the content. Although now New Zealand On Air is also funding podcasts like this and YouTube content and Facebook content and so on.
God, I wish New Zealand was funding podcasts like this. I'd love some of that.
Hey, have you applied for funding?
Looked around. I'm difficult to fit because people say, "What's your demographic?" And I go, "People who like to listen to interesting conversations." Because I'm not like a tech podcast or a disabilities podcast or I don't have a niche necessarily. I'm like you were saying before we turned the mics on. We literally turn the mic on and go, "What should we talk about?" And that's it. So I have to hope that viewership and listenership continues to grow, and I'll just monetize it. That's the way to keep this thing going.
Good on you.
And then I can leave the ends on air funding for for the disability podcast with fewer people, or the whatever, or the kids programming, or the whatever it is. So if people are watching, share us around.
Yes, please.
So what's next, Suze? What's going on? What's up for you next?
It really depends what's going to happen with lockdown, I guess. But I've got a couple of events that I'm emceeing with the Christchurch Symphony Orchestra. I'm on tour through the South Island, and that's supposed to start in October, so we should be all clear by then. I'll have all that information on my Facebook pages and my website, suzy.co.nz. I have the Kauri family and Te Whānau Kauri. What's that there? Can you see? I wonder what that thing can be.
I can do it bigger.
In a hole beneath the tree. Oh, there you go.
There you go.
It's part of the Kauri family. So that is a book and a song. The song originated in Australia with Arthur Basting, who is an amazing, oh my goodness, I'm just about to run out of battery. I'm on 20% power. Are you still there?
We're still here. Hey,
okay.
Back again.
Yeah, hello. The screen went black. I've only got 20% power. I just didn't think about that before we started chatting. But so I've got another book coming out just before Christmas. This is with Scholastic. The book with Itty Bitty Beats is coming out just before Christmas. That's another song as well. Christmas in summer, it's always a stunner. You happen to be on my shop at the moment.
Yeah.
Where I've got my books and my DVDs and downloads. Through lockdown, one of the most sought after products that I had are the elastics that I sew myself. And in fact, we had so many schools once lockdown finished purchasing elastic bands for their kids to jump in the playground, knuckle bones, all kinds of things. So look, it's a really interesting time for me because my audience for children is starting to grow.
Yep.
Back to what it was, but the audience there is not so much kids our age, but those millennials, those people that used to watch me when they were little, which is really, really exciting because I have opportunities now as an MC to be able to, or as a public speaker, to be able to go and reach those people as well. So I've got a few little projects that I'm looking for funding for, which will take me around the country to be able to connect with the kids during the day and with the big kids during the night type thing. So I've got a few ideas, but it'll be really interesting to see what 2021 brings us. Hopefully we'll have COVID under control and we will have this new sense of normalcy where we can just go about doing what we do so well. And
I hope that I read a story the other day about there is like the pinnacle, the vaccine with the most hope. I can't think of the words that, but it's the one that I think is the most likely to do the job, coming out of the UK, and Australia has applied for 30 million vials or something, and they've included New Zealand and the Pacific Island in it, and they're talking about the first half of next year. So that would be lovely if that did happen. Hey, but I was going to ask you one thing, actually, just looking at your lovely images here. You know, we don't have a Smithsonian here in New Zealand, but like in the Smithsonian in America, there's things like Fonzie's jacket and that kind of stuff.
oh, really?
And I was wondering maybe these Suzy Cato glasses could be in the New Zealand version of the Smithsonian, because they're pretty they're pretty iconic for a number of us that were with you at the start, surely.
Yes, and I've got a couple of pairs of them, so including with the original prescription in them. And I think when I look back at it now, we were just talking about it in the family just a couple of nights ago, is I was one of the first people in New Zealand to wear glasses on telly.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And in fact, I got I don't know that they really trolled back in those days, but I got sent a few handwritten letters about the fact that I shouldn't be wearing glasses on television because it would encourage children to want to wear glasses. As it did encourage those who needed to wear glasses to wear their glasses, because back in the day, who wanted to wear their glasses, or who does anyway? Kids didn't want to wear their glasses. They'd take them off and lose them. Susie wears glasses. Why don't you wear your glasses? Oh, yeah, okay. If Susie does, then, you know, that's my friend. I'll wear my glasses too. But, yeah, I did get a letter once saying that and my Doc Martens, and there was something else that I used to wear, and I got this letter that came complete with a return email address, a telephone number, and things like that. It was like, I'm not going to get in contact with you. But, yeah, there's a few things like those cosmic jumpers and so on that would work quite well within a museum. However, I cannot get my hands on one. I've got one that's oversized from 91 FM days. Right. A dear friend who I work with making the radio show has one that he's given to me. It's about, we could both fit in it actually. It's ginormous, which I must do something with. But those are iconic. In fact, it's Throwback Thursday. I've got a couple of photographs that I need to share on my social media pages. Overseas in the UK and at Whistler is the most recent photograph I've had from people who've celebrated in Waitangi Day around the world. There you go. And they hand make their own jumpers. There you go.
Look at that. Is that kamikaze? Cosmic.
Yeah. Cosmic.
I remember my sisters. I remember that being really popular with I've got 3 older sisters, and I remember that being really popular with them as well. Well, that would have been early mid-90s sort of thing. That was when that brand was out. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
All handmade.
Wow. I was thinking as well. I've got friends who are in a band who have been performing since the 90s, and they do kind of quirky kids type music. Well, they've moved into kids entertainment now, but they've done quirky sort of music since the 90s, a band called The Lads. And they're finding now that parents are bringing their kids to their concerts, and the parents are coming because they remember, you know, Hey Flower or the Cactus Song or whatever it is from the 90s, and the kids are coming because they're seeing them on various American television programs with their content sort of thing. That must be something you go through as well, eh?
Oh yes, like Mrs. Doubtfire. Yeah. I have done a couple of like in-stores and so on with my book just this year, and the parents that are bringing their children through, and they might even bring their mum or their dad with them, who so we've got the 3 generations. So parents who are now grandparents used to watch because their child was watching. Right. Now their grandchild is watching, and in some cases, great-grandchildren. So, wow. Yeah. But it's pretty phenomenal when you think about it. And television for 30 years.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, because that means even like a person who was born in 1990 who is now 30, who had had 2 or 3 watching you back then, may have a 3 or 4 of them. It'd be very feasible they'd have a 3 or 4-year-old themselves. So literally one of your early viewers, it was like a mate of mine who's an intermediate school teacher. He remembers his first time where one of his intermediate students came back to him as a trainee teacher. Is that kind of full circle sort of thing? Which actually, when you think about it, only takes about 8 years. It's not a huge amount of time, but is a yardstick. Hey, Suze, I think because your battery was going to die down as well.
Say goodbye. See you later.
See you later. I've really got to fly.
See you later. It's time for us to end. See you later. I'll be back.
Well, I don't know if we'll be back again, but if any time you want, you're more than welcome to come back again. You got the doing the pigtails. You want to go back and have a look?
Make my ponytails.
The wrong glasses.
Yeah.
Hey, it's been a blast, Susie. You are indeed a treasure to the nation. A personal treasure as well. You've always been so lovely and so lovely to my kids and stuff, and just in general. So thank you for giving us some time this morning. It's been a lot of fun. Let's just put this up there again. Your website, if people are going to want to find out more about you and where to get your product, and it's the Cody. Where is it going? There we go. Tefano Cody or the Cody family, and that's out at the moment. Great for Christmas. A great present for Christmas. And this
wonderful. Thank you very much.
This is the one that we've got here that's signed by you. We've got Susie the Doctor.
Oh, Susie the Doctor.
Yeah, and that's
fabulous.
the one that you use. I think we've got Susie the Farmer as well, actually, upstairs on our bookshelf. And that would have been from, well, if my eldest is 16, it probably would have been at least 12, 13 years ago. Still sitting up there. Still got the autograph in there. They still. It's funny when kids give up. They move past various stages in life. They still treasure those things. They grab them out in the gear and they kind of hold them tight and they remember. So thank you. You've been someone who's been a part of my family and my life for quite a long time, and I really appreciate you giving us some time this morning. It's been fun. And
I appreciate being invited. Thank you.
Anytime you want to come and chat or have something to talk to us about or tell us about, we always will love to have you back here in the show.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a real pleasure, and give your kids a big hug from me. It is an absolute honour to have been a part of their lives, and that's something that I've never ever taken for granted. And to have been able to be in the lounges or dining rooms of families throughout New Zealand for so long has been something I treasure. I continue to treasure. So yeah, and definitely I will come back for a kōrero. That'll be lovely.
And I guess what I am is one example of hundreds of thousands, or if not millions, of parents over the whole country that your content and you yourself has impacted in such a positive way, and we are grateful to you for what you've been putting up and what you continue to put up with home learning TV and stuff as well. So you're awesome, and thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. I can't take all the credit. I was a cog in the wheel, a massive team that put together to make the Early Bird show, which I first started on, and You and Me and Susie's World. And now I do a lot of it myself, but no I in team. It was a team effort. Yeah, and like this kōrero, it's a team effort. It's a conversation.
There's no I, but there is an M and an E. So, look at it either way you want. All right, so talk to you soon.
See you later. Goodbye, my friend.